get into the good things. So, for many people, brain injury is not something that they ever saw coming or had in their life plan. And so it not only impacts the person, but their entire support system. Suddenly, individuals have the role of caregiver with no really sort of guidebook or training to help navigate this really confusing time and all these different new life changes. So, how can we help them feel more confident in empowering individuals with disabilities, including brain injury, and help them achieve their goals, as well as helping the caregivers achieve their goals? So that's why I'm really thankful to have Lisa Hoskins today with the Center for Volunteer Caregiving to talk about the powerful tools for caregivers. And so I'm going to stop my share, and Lisa's going to get her presentation up. And in the meantime, I will tell you a little bit about her. Lisa is a licensed clinical social worker with a bachelor's and master's degree in social work. Her career focus has been in healthcare and aging settings for those in hospice settings and the ALS community. During that time, she's worked both with patients and family caregivers and is a strong advocate for self-care, respite services, and living the best life that one can. And I am all for that. So thank you so much, Lisa. I'm going to turn it over to you, and I really look forward to some of the tools that you have to give to us today.
Great. Thank you so much for that welcome. It's good to see everybody here. Thank you for joining us. So our topic today is self-care. And this, of course, is being focused on the caregiving community, but anybody anywhere needs to do self-care. That's just an important part of flourishing and thriving. So I want us to begin with just sort of a grounding breath. I know I usually need one before I present, so I'm going to offer that to you of just kind of getting us into the space to be alert and focused and open to the information. So I'm just going to take a moment to take my own deep breath right now. So. Okay. All right. Well, as I think COVID certainly put more of a spotlight on the caregiving community. And as you know, most of you probably are aware, about 1 out of 5 people in the whole country are caregivers. And more than almost about a quarter of those caregivers do feel like being a caregiver has made their own health worse. 75% of caregivers found caregiving to be stressful, and more than half found it very overwhelming. Depression is also much more increased for caregivers. So it's 20 to 40% an increase in depression with people that are caregiving. And for those that are caregiving for someone with dementia or other cognitive impairments, that's an even higher rate. That's the highest rate of caregivers that have the stress. Despite all that, 9 out of 10 caregivers really that were surveyed said that even with all the stressors that they had during caregiving, that caring for their loved one was very worthwhile. So just to give us a little bit of a view of our caregiving population that we have right now. And as we know, with the aging of our country, that number is just going to continue to increase significantly for caregiving. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see everything okay. Let's see.
Yep, all set.
Okay, great. Whoops. Let's see. Make sure my picture isn't in the way. So self-care, really at the beginning of the day, it is ultimately a choice. We get lots of little choices every day to make a choice to help us be more healthy and to take care of ourselves. It is a necessary part of being human, and it ultimately is our responsibility. So nobody else is going to come and take care of you or help you to do that. It's on us to sort of make those decisions for ourselves. It does require a lot of self-awareness. We have to have some really good insight, tune into ourselves and know kind of what makes us tick. It's also ideally much more effective if we can be proactive and consistent with our self-care. We don't want to wait till it's an emergency. We really want to try to keep on top of it as much as we can. And ultimately, self-care really does require accepting our limitations and asking for help where we need it, and also letting go. So those are all important things. So of course, there are a lot of negative results from neglecting ourselves. It does increase our own health problems. We can have a breakdown in our relationships and how we interact with other people. We can feel certainly burned out, depressed, as we talked about earlier, and then just having a decreased quality of life overall. So today I'm going to be talking about powerful tools for caregivers. It is a wonderful course. It's a 6-week class. It's about 90 minutes per class. And it's an evidence-based psychoeducational class. And so when we say evidence-based, it's kind of interesting because we read a script. And we do try to liven it up as much as possible. But the idea is that they want you to do it since it's been studied. The effects are very positive for attending this class, that you have to say the same thing consistently in each class and make sure that everybody receives the same information. So that's one reason we do the script. But they break it down into these 6 classes, as you see on the screen: taking care of you, identifying and reducing stress, communicating your feelings, communicating in challenging situations, learning from our emotions, and then mastering caregiving decisions. So when we take the class, you also get, it is a free class. Sometimes you can make a donation if you want towards the cost of the book. You do receive this caregiver help book. It's a wonderful resource and you get to keep that. And there's a lot of additional information in there. We don't cover nearly everything that's in the book. So it's really kind of helpful to have that. And the class, it's not talking about hands-on care, but it's talking more about the emotional and the cognitive piece of caregiving. And the self-care piece as well. So one big part of the Powerful Tools class is coming up with action plans. And so we do this at the end of every class, and then the following class, we review our action plan that we made for that last week. And we make a new action plan for the next week. So when we look at it, we really want to make sure that it's some sort of self-care activity that the caregiver wants to do. It's not a should do activity. So it might be, I want to go out and have a cup of coffee with my best friend tomorrow morning. So you make your plan, you make it manageable and realistic. So you make it, something that's attainable, not too big. And then we have people really think about the specifics of what that's going to look like. So you say what the activity is going to be, how long the activity will last, what time during the day you're going to do it. You could even say what day you're going to do it and how many times during the week you're going to do it. So you try to be really specific about what your intention and what your focus for that activity is going to be. And then you usually will say what your confidence level is. Like, I think out of 10, I think I will do that probably an 8. Like, I feel like I'm probably going to be able to do that. So we come up with our action plans, like I said, and the caregivers have a week to work on that. And then again, we report out the following week on how that went. And just sort of hear what people's successes were. If they did 1 out of 3 times, to me, that's a success. So it's really nice to kind of hear that and share that. But the intentionality of it is I think what's the most important piece of that. So if somebody has trouble with their action plan, we look a little bit at the solution seeking approach, where we look at the first step is identifying what the problem is. You list ideas out for what some solutions for that problem might be. You pick one of those ideas to try to solve that problem. You do it. You kind of see what the results are. You evaluate how that looked. If it didn't go so well, then you might choose another idea to try and use other resources. And sometimes, we might have a situation where the problem isn't really solvable right now. So maybe we've tried a couple things and we're just going to kind of sit on it and sort of see how we want that to come out. I think the important thing is the trying piece of this. Like, we we don't want to come to a point where we're like, no, that's not going to work, or no, I can't do that because that's not going to work, and defeat ourselves before we even try it. It's important to at least try things. And if they don't work, that's okay. You know, we can tweak it. We can come up with other ideas or solutions. And so it's kind of that brainstorming, kind of that evaluation process as we're going through. So as I'm sure, you know, most of you have experienced in one way or another, dealing with illness, working with illness, there's a lot of hopelessness sometimes, a lot of feelings of not being at all in control. And so I think it's so important as a professional caregiver, as well as a family caregiver, to really focus on what you can do. And one of the most important things, I think, is to have self-compassion. To really let go of that perfectionism mindset, and to really have a tremendous amount of grace for not only yourself, but for others, but really, you know, being very compassionate towards yourself. And then focusing on energy where, you know, we are looking at solutions, we're looking at what we can change. So, you know, there's several different ways that we can change a situation. And most of those are really sort of our perspective. How do we view what is going on? How are we responding to what is going on? Those are probably the biggest areas that we as an individual can make a difference or make a change. And as you've heard, you know, we talk about the only thing you can control is yourself. And that is true. That is really true. And focusing on how we look at things and how we respond to things are really important. And of course, letting go of really, you know, the things that are not changeable, that we can't impact, is also really important. So along with that, it is the perspective shift that we have. So if we're in a situation, and, you know, we may not be able to do this in the moment of a situation, and that's okay. But maybe after a situation happens, we can use this where we step back and we really try to see the big picture. Sometimes we get, you know, we're so involved and we're so closed in to what's happening. It's sometimes helpful to really take a step back and just look at it in the scheme of, like, you know, the world, the universe, the global world that we live in. And then trying to approach it with more objectivity versus maybe not as emotional, not as a subjective response, but more of an objective response. One thing that might be helpful to do is, and it's sort of a difficult exercise, but if you're describing something that happened or describing a situation, how can you do it in neutral tones, neutral words versus a judgment here or there? How can you make it just sound very neutral? Neither good nor bad. And that's a really kind of a good practice of trying to communicate in that way, or like think to yourself in that way when you're describing a situation. And reframing, our cognitive reframing, adjusting our thoughts is a real big part of our perspective shift. And we'll talk a little bit more about some examples of what that looks like. And then I like going back to our self-compassion. I really just like these phrases, you know, of things that we can say to ourselves, you know, may I give myself all the compassion I need. May I accept this moment exactly as it is. May I accept myself exactly as I am in this moment. Just really allowing ourselves to be human and to be vulnerable. And that's okay. You know, we're doing the best we can do right now, and that's good. And if we can acknowledge that, I think it helps us to not put as much pressure on ourselves, to not feel like we, you know, have to be perfect or meet all these expectations that we might feel that we have. So a few ways of also kind of thinking about things a little differently, and this is specifically comes from the Powerful Tools class, is that, you know, when we have setbacks, we view them as temporary. Everything is temporary. Nothing's going to happen, whether it be good or bad or in between. Nothing is forever. Everything changes. So if you're in an especially difficult moment, to just be able to think, okay, this is not going to last forever. This is only a temporary situation, or this, you know, particular event right now is temporary. The way that I feel is temporary. Also viewing misfortune as specific and not universal. So maybe you have a couple bad things that happened to you that day. Oh, everything bad is happening why does everything bad happen to me? Nothing ever goes right. I just feel like I have a cloud over me. That usually does not help the mindset. So really trying to say, okay, well, this thing today did not go the way that I would have liked it to. This thing, and just try to look at it as a situation, a specific event, and not just your overall, life. We talked about seeking solutions. So, if there is a situation, we can think about, okay, what are some ways that I can make the situation better? What are some solutions that I might have? I'm going to brainstorm those. Again, like trying to put the control where you can, and giving yourself a little bit of ability to adjust where you need to. Viewing mistakes as opportunities to learn. You hear this one all the time, but it is a good place. It's a good opportunity to, again, not be harsh, not judge, not say you failed, but to just say, okay, well, that did not go as well as I thought it might. Let me, think what did I learn? Okay, next time I'm going to do this a little differently. This one is a good one. Is give yourself credit for all that you do. We tend to focus on the negative. We tend to focus on the things on our list that did not get completed. Try to focus on what you did today. I got up and I did this errand and I took care of this, and it may be things that you do every single day, but just really giving yourself credit for all the good things that you are doing, what you are accomplishing, and trying to just, be happy about the things that you're able to do. Recognize that beliefs are not facts. So this is an important one. In our minds, just because we think something does not mean that it is true, or it is a fact, or that it is real. And we have to be able to say to our mind, okay, I'm hearing what you're saying, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's accurate. So really being able to not necessarily think that everything that goes through your mind is really the way it is, because you might think, oh, I just, I'm such a loser in this. But like, if you really think about it, am I? That is not a true statement. I am not a loser. I didn't do as well in this situation, but that is not an accurate statement. And then this leads into our practicing positive self-talk. And that's a big, big thing. What we say to ourselves in our mind really impacts our mental state, our how we look at things. It impacts a lot, how we feel about ourselves. And so really, think about some of the things that you're saying to yourself, and are they nice things? Are they things that are helpful in lifting you up? And if not, how can you change some of those? How can you make them a positive statement? You should be your biggest supporter. So how can you support yourself? Sometimes I've heard people say, would I speak like this to my best friend? And if you wouldn't, then, how would you speak to your best friend? What would you say? So a couple of reframing examples, we won't go through all of these, but, it's just, again, it's sort of shifting the perspective, looking at things a little bit differently. So it might be, oh, I have too much to do. I just have too much to do. But, you can say, okay, I do have a lot to do, but today, I'm just going to take things one step at a time. I can only do what I can do, and I'll just do it one step at a time. And being able to look at things, in that respect. There's too much conflict in my life might become, I'm really going to seek out the good. I'm going to look for some of the good things that happened today. I don't know what I should do. Might be, I don't need to have all the answers at this moment. This was another, I had seen this somewhere, and I'm forgetting where, but I really liked it because, we always talk about life balance. And if you think about it, balance is maybe a few seconds of a minute. It's just not a very long period of time. So for us to be able to say, oh, I'm seeking balance, I'm not sure how realistic that is. I think it's really difficult to get that balance because, again, it happens just for maybe a very short period of time. So let's maybe look at harmony instead. Like, how can we just have some harmony in our life? And so in this example, they were just saying, that harmony includes acceptance that things happen in life that we cannot understand and don't seem fair. That's a real thing. To have that, also harmony includes purpose. And what is our purpose for us as an individual, and what's unique to us as a person? And also the community of people with like-minded values and behaviors, being around a community, whatever that may look like. That's usually important, to feel like you belong and you have your people. So we talk also about identifying and reducing our personal stress. So, the first thing when you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs is that you have to get your physiological needs met. And that is making sure that you are just doing the basics, right? That you are sleeping well, that you are getting plenty of hydration, you're drinking water, you're drinking fluids, you're eating so you're not getting hangry or your blood sugar is not getting low. Like some of the basics is just good self-care. And we'll function so much better if we can do that. So what are some ways that you say you might be getting up a lot to help a loved one in the middle of the night and you're not getting as good a sleep? So what are some different things that, strategies that you could think about that might help where you're not having to wake up quite so much? So sometimes people get like electric doorbells, and then if their loved one needs you, they ring that and you can hear them. Different things like that might be able to support your sleeping, or making sure that you don't have any light in your room, or you have a sound machine that's playing to support that. We also really need to have that self-awareness piece. So it's important, and we talk about this in one of the first classes of the powerful tools, is really identifying what causes me stress. What are situations that I feel particularly stressed in? And so that way you can kind of anticipate them and maybe mentally prepare a little bit if you know some of that. It's also recognizing those warning signs of stress. How does stress feel in your body? When do you know when you're starting to bubble up a little bit or get frustrated? It could feel like you could have physical sensations. You could be twitching. There might be different things that you could find, but really understanding yourself and when you can start to recognize those. And, listening to those emotions, what am I feeling? Okay, what am I feeling? And then, what was the trigger for this? Like, why am I feeling like this? And really kind of understanding that, okay, I got a little agitated when my sister said that I wasn't doing a good job, or that was my perception of what she said. And that really got me, a little bit upset. So just try to figure out like how the outside world is affecting our internal space. We do talk a lot about communication as well. So emotions we talk about communication. So some of the things that we talk about are using I statements instead of you statements. And we practice this and we talk about what that looks like, but how we take responsibility for us. Like we say, I feel, I feel anxious about this situation, or I need to talk with you a little bit more about this situation, that we are able to say what we are needing and communicating that effectively to other people. And that we're not using a you tone, which can often sound blaming to other people. Well, you didn't do this, or you said this and then you didn't do it, just trying to make it where the tone isn't quite like that, because that tends to put people on the defensive. It tends to derail our conversations. And so it's really like focusing on what I need, how I'm communicating what I need. And that usually goes a lot better. So we do talk about that. And, unless we tell people what we need, we can't expect others to know. We can't expect others to be mind readers of what we want. And we might think, well, they've known me for 20 years. They should know what I need. But no, it doesn't, it really shouldn't be that way. We do need to communicate for ourselves in that respect. We also talk about a couple specific types of communication, which one is called our assertive communication. And then another one is called alignment Aikido communication. And I won't get into detail about those, but it's just a couple different situations of where you can kind of organize how you're going to maybe have a conversation that might be a little bit more difficult with somebody, with the assertive communication. And then the Aikido is all about aligning. So it's about hearing what the other person is saying and letting them know that you've heard that, and trying to find common ground with that. So really having some empathy and finding that common ground. So they're really good tools to use. So we talk about that. That's class 4 is where we really get into that one. And then on class 6, we talk a lot about the importance of family meetings. And we do realize that family is one of the big stressors that we have, like how we work with our siblings to take care of our parent, or how we're working with other people in our support team, in our care team, things like that. So we do talk about the importance of family meetings and ways to kind of help communicate better with other people, make sure that everybody's on the same page. So we talk a lot about in terms of doing the things that we can do. And so I really, really like the Serenity Prayer of, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I just really like that. And to me, that's one I use a lot to kind of let, there are things that I can do and I will do those. There are some things that, I cannot affect at this time. And then just having the judgment of knowing the difference between those. That's another real important piece of just having the judgment to know what you can or can't do at that particular moment. So we continue to talk about managing emotions, and we talked a little bit about identifying those and understanding those. So we do talk about how there are emotional ups and downs, like we all have them. We do have to find ways to make sure that we are managing them so they're not controlling us. We want to make sure we're managing our emotions in healthy ways, that we're not taking it out on other people, and that we're not, taking it out on ourselves even. So again, important to identify, what is this emotion that I'm feeling? What's really the core of this? And so we talk about anger and how anger is obviously a very common emotion, but most of the time with anger, it's usually fueled by feeling hurt, being fearful or scared of something happening, feeling insecure. So there's usually some more something beneath the anger that it's usually important to figure out what that is and why we're responding with the anger. The other important piece is knowing, that I'm going to accept the way that I feel. Like, feelings are not good or bad. We put a negative or a positive connotation on them, but they really are, they should be more neutral. How can we look at them as being neutral and being able to say, like, this is how I'm feeling right now, and owning that feeling and giving yourself the grace to say, it's okay. I mean, I'm really angry right now. I'm really hurt. And that's okay. Like, I'm accepting that is how I feel right now. And just really giving ourselves a break from that. Because sometimes I think we beat ourselves up for feeling a certain way rather than just dealing with the way we feel. We sort of, create a little bit more angst for ourselves by trying to fight against it, or, feeling bad that we feel that way. Expressing emotions, we talked about how to express emotions in a healthy manner. Examining emotions again, just trying to figure out, okay, where did this come from? Why am I starting to feel like this? What might have happened before? What might have triggered this? And, really, if you're struggling, we do talk about strong emotions, where we talk about anger, we talk about guilt, depression, and when it might be the time to go and seek some professional help, to go see a counselor, to talk through some of these things. That's always available. And I think that's very beneficial to go and talk to somebody objective at some points in your life. So now we're going to segue a little bit to sort of some tools for coping. So we're going to talk a little bit about respite. And, caregiving, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So the pacing of that is really important. So respite is a break for unpaid caregivers who provide ongoing care for an individual of any age who needs help, care, or supervision due to disability, chronic condition, or other special needs. And respite is intended to provide relief to the caregiver. So of course, we know that caregivers are caregivers for people of all ages. It's not just older adults. It's not just those that are, have illness, but, there's caregivers for people of all ages. And so respite is really important to provide that sort of that break, what I like to say, a restorative break to the caregiver. And that's a big part of self-care if we have a long-term caregiving situation. So there's a lot of benefits for respite, and it does support that family stability. It can help really kind of keep things, in a better tone around the house. And when we say respite care, I mean, we could be talking about 2 or 3 hours once a week that that you're going to get to go out to do something special. It could mean a couple weeks, like a weekend once a year, a 3-day weekend that you go away. It looks like various things. So it doesn't have to be real long term. It could be shorter intervals of respite. But they do show that if you get sort of regular respite, that it does increase your resiliency. It can definitely help reduce the stress and the burnout from caregiving. And because of that, it can help prevent potential abuse and neglect of our loved one, of ourselves. It delays out of home placement. So usually if we are taking better care of ourselves, we can keep our loved one with us longer. And then it provides our care recipients, so the person that we're caring for, it gives them a break from us, from the caregiver, which, that's nice for them too. So it's usually a win-win-win, where it helps the care receiver, it helps the caregiver, it helps the person that's there providing the respite. So, and it does promote the health and well-being for everybody involved. And so there's sort of 3 main categories of respite. So there's certainly the informal respite, which is, if you have a family, a friend, neighbor, some communities of faith might have like a mommy's morning out, or, some type of adult day program that they might run once a month. For our organization, it's the Center for Volunteer Caregiving. It's just in Wake County in the Raleigh Triangle area, but we connect community volunteers with older adults in the community. And so my program is where I help with volunteer caregiver respite, so that there might be volunteer programs. There's also some things called consumer-directed vouchers. So for North Carolina, we have something called a lifespan respite voucher that one can apply for if they've not had any sort of respite, and they get they get $500. They usually pay for that out of pocket, and then they get reimbursed for it. And there's you would apply to this lifespan respite grant. Usually a healthcare professional, like a social worker, would help you complete the application. And then once you turn it in and you've been accepted, you have about 3 months to use the $500. And so you fill out the paperwork and you send it back and you get a check. But it's a way to just help caregivers that are just not getting that break, like more of a chunk of time. And again, you can use it for a few hours a week. You could use it for a long weekend. It's up to you. That's why it's called consumer directed, because you can decide who comes in the home and does the caregiving. You can decide how you want to use it. So it's a nice option. There's one for it's dementia specific, but there's a program called Project Care in our state that also helps provide some vouchers for families that are working with people with dementias. And then some disease organizations have grants. I know like at the ALS Association, we had a caregiving grant that we provided. And then of course there's a lot of paid options, which a lot of us, it's hard to afford some of the paid, but there are, home care agencies, adult day programs. A lot of times when I work with families that are caring for someone with dementia, I think that's usually a pretty good option. Doesn't fit everybody, but that's usually a good option. And then some facility-based options where you can find a bed at a skilled nursing facility or an assisted living facility. You would have to pay out of pocket, but they might be able to provide like a longer, a weekend or 2-3 weeks of respite that you might need. So some additional tools for coping I wanted to start with our internal. And so one of the big things is the breathing. And I really like this one as a tool for coping because we have it, of course, we have our breath with us always. That's always something we can access. And it doesn't take very long. So if we can, feel, again, it's about identifying, feeling when some of those strong feelings are coming on, if we can notice that, then we can take a moment to maybe just stop what we're doing and take a deep breath, or just take a moment to ground ourselves and breathe. And really doing that for a minute or two, I mean, not very long, really can help, lower that tension, calm us, reduce our anxiety. So that is a great tool. And so I have this on my computer screen, but on my laptop that I use. But yeah, breathe in slowly, gently, deeply, and breathe out. It's just a great reminder that we have that. And then meditation or prayer, whatever you call it, it's just a time where you can be still and quiet for just a little bit. It could be 5 minutes, it could be 10 minutes, it doesn't have to be long again, but just to have, a little bit of quiet. And that might involve saying a positive statement to yourself. That might involve a prayer, or, it might just be there sitting silently on your front porch, listening to the birds, whatever that might look like for you. Really having sort of that quiet time, I think it can be really beneficial. And again, does not have to take a very long period of time. And I liked this one. We don't meditate to get better at meditating. We meditate to get better at life. Because a lot of people will say, well, I can't meditate because I can't sit there still. And I still have thoughts that go through my mind. And that's okay. It's not about not having anything go through your mind or being completely, that there are no thoughts. It's really not about that. It's really just about the exercise and the practice of sitting still, and then just like stopping so much of the voices in your head, maybe slowing some of that chatter down a little bit, quieting it a little bit. And then it does really help, when we can do that, practice that, it helps just carry us through life, through that day. So that's a good one. So if you don't have some type of practice, you don't have to be a religious person to do this. It might be something to consider to incorporate. And then gratitude, they've done studies where they really are finding that the gratitude journal has been really helpful. So you might start the day off with something you're grateful for first thing in the morning. You might you might say a few things at the end of the day that you're thankful for, or what, that went well for you that day. It's really trying to hone in on the goodness in life, because our brains are wired to think negatively. It's like we tend to have a negative bias. And so this is sort of retraining the brain a little bit to really look at, okay, well, this wasn't a good situation. However, this was something that was good that came out of that. This is something that I appreciated, or this is something I learned. Like what good can be found out of some of these things that may be more difficult. So gratitude, and again, it doesn't have to be anything formal. You don't have to write it down. You can just think in your mind a few things that were good from that day. But it does get us better into a practice of kind of recognizing that the positive. So some additional tools for coping I like to talk about is mindfulness, which we hear a lot more about these days, which is good. And so to me, there's sort of two parts to mindfulness. One of them is being in the moment, just really, really just being focused on whatever it is that you are doing at that moment, and not thinking in the past, not thinking in the future, but really just thinking in the now and what you're doing. And then the other one of mindfulness that I think is also something that is maybe an activity that you are really keenly focused on. So maybe you're putting a puzzle together, and you're just, you are just really into looking at that puzzle. So you're focused on that aspect, and you're not thinking about a bunch of other things. It kind of helps you to quiet your mind and focus on that activity. So mindfulness is also a really good way of reducing anxiety and stress, because you're just in the moment. You're just living that time, and you're not regretting the past or anticipating or fretting the future. You're kind of just right here, right now. Positive self-talk, we talked about that a little bit earlier, but again, that's being first aware of these messages. What are the messages that you are saying to yourself? Are you consistently saying something that is not a good message for you, a very negative message, or something that's harmful to you, that's not helpful? And then once you recognize, hey, yeah, I am saying this a lot to myself, how can you reframe that and create a positive statement instead? What can you say to yourself that makes you feel good, that's uplifting, that's true? And so sometimes they'll come up with a mantra. They'll come up with like a statement that they say to themselves. They might write it on their mirror, an intention for the day, whatever it might be. Or when you hear yourself thinking something negative, maybe you have something to counteract that. Okay, I'm noticing I'm saying this negative thing, and I'm going to say, I'm doing the best I can. I'm doing the best I can, and I'm doing pretty good. So I'm just going to focus on what I can get done today, and that's what I'm going to do. So some external ways, tools for coping, of course, are to seek out emotional support and or socialization. Relationships are important. It's important to interact with people, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. Having in-person, face-to-face relationships and interactions is very important for us in our mental health. So trying to be around positive, family and friends, being around people that make you feel good is always really nice. And also realizing, that if there are people that aren't making you feel really good, then, thinking about that and maybe limiting that exposure a little bit, making some choices about what is good for you. Of course, counselors, a therapist is always, very helpful if that's something that you feel like you might need. And peer support groups. I mean, there's no replacement for that, because you get to hear from other people that really kind of get what you're going through, and that might have some suggestions or thoughts about how you can handle a situation or deal with it. So those are also important. And usually we've got quite a few really good disease specific, support groups out there that are provided. So and also I wanted to mention about the powerful tools for caregivers class. So it was initially, of course, created to be an in-person class. With COVID, they did develop a virtual class. So if you're interested in the class, I would definitely look to see if you can find a local class anywhere near you. But if you're not able to, it is possible that you might still be able to learn a lot from the class by doing a virtual class. So just keep that in mind. And they do have them listed out on their website, the Powerful Tools website, which is in the this PowerPoint that I'll send to you all in the next day or so. But so anyway, so an in-person is great, but then the virtual also works. And then a lot more caregivers can access it because they, can do it from their home. So another tool is movement, seeking out movement, whatever that looks like. Moving our bodies helps our mental health. There's no doubt about that. It sends good endorphins to us. It makes us feel better. I mean, it's really important. So whatever that looks like for you, whether it's walking or some more heavy duty cardiovascular, I do think moving your body. If you're feeling in a slump that day, try to go out and take a walk, be outside. Yoga is great because you've got the breathing, you've got the movement, you've got the focus, flexibility. There's lots of good stuff in yoga. And there's a nonprofit that has free yoga classes in this area, in the Triangle area. And a lot of them now are online as well. So You Call This Yoga is something, you might want to look at if you want to access some free yoga classes. Some additional tools for coping are, green space. We've really learned that that our health is improved by being outside, by being in the woods and in nature. It's kind of phenomenal. So it's just, just being out there and being in literally in the green space makes our heart rate go down, kind of like de-stresses us, makes us calmer. So even if it's like, if you need a moment and you just want to go outside for a few minutes, and sit in your backyard, it doesn't have to be long. Again, it can just be a shorter period of time, but that is shown, to really be beneficial. laughter and having just exposure, to humor, to people that make you laugh, to laughing, watching TV shows that are funny and light, and, you can just have a good laugh. Laughing, definitely helps too. Some way of coping for some people might be a creative expression. So people, you might want to journal. You might enjoy painting, doing some type of craft, just creating something and getting in that space sometimes. And that can also be part of the mindfulness too, where you're just really focused on your activity that you're doing. But just being able to express yourself, I think, can be really helpful. Being around animals is also shown to reduce our stress levels. Just petting an animal, just that petting a soft and furry animal usually can calm and soothe us. It can also, just ease our feelings of loneliness, and you're connecting with somebody, you're having that physical connection. But it has been found to boost our mood and to decrease depression. So if you're an animal person, how can you have some exposure to animals, or just get a little bit more of that in your life? So lastly, I'm just going to review some additional resources for you that I've kind of compiled over the months or whatnot. So caregiving, I mean, there's such good resources out there these days, but I've listed a bunch of different websites that have caregivers, caregiving situations, like Caregiver Action Network, the Family Caregiver Alliance. Those are big ones that are national websites and organizations. The AARP has a lot of caregiving information on their websites. They really have a lot of good information. So that might, be a place. There's daughterhood.org. There's also a website that's, what's it called? It's Adult Children of Aging Parents. That's an organization. I thought that was really helpful. There's one called Daily Caring that a caregiver had recommended to me, dailycaring.com. And then, you have some different websites like, care.com helps you find caregivers. Caring Bridge helps you communicate a health situation to lots of people, or so that you're not having to talk to everybody separately on the phone. There's, lots of helping hands helps you coordinate, meal trains and things that need to happen if you're caring for a sick relative or loved one that you might need some assistance with. Lots of great apps out there. Todoist is like a list app. There's one called Camcard that you can scan business cards. I thought that was kind of cool. So if you have lots of doctor's appointments or lots of, doctor cards. Jure is like a mental health journaling app. One that I really like and use a lot is called I Am. And it sends you positive affirmations throughout the day. And I use that. I get probably 5 or so a day. And I really, really like that because it gets me, and the ones that really resonate with me, I save. So I'll save that into my camera roll. There's also lots of good podcasts out there that you might want to check out that might be helpful. And then for mindfulness and meditation, there's some new programming that has happened. So Netflix has, it's called Headspace Guide to Meditation. There's also an app that you can get that's about Headspace, and that's really good. And HBO Max had A World of Calm that you could watch that was kind of like helped you go to sleep and was really calming. Lots of good content on YouTube. You can look up Jon Kabat-Zinn, and he was the creator of mindfulness meditation. So there's lots of great stuff. You can do like guided imagery or all sorts of things on YouTube. Email newsletters, if you're wanting to get some positive newsletters about meditation, different things, there's lots of different newsletters you can sign up for, and I just listed a few there. Again, podcasts for mindfulness and meditation. Sharon Salzberg is really good. She's all about loving kindness, which is a great one. There's a ton of meditation apps now, like Insight Timer is really good. They've got lots of free meditations. Calm is a really good one. Relax Melody has it's like a sound machine with all sorts of different sounds. And then of course, lots of different websites. So Tara Brock is one of my favorites. So she's really good when she talks about meditation, and she's very calming to listen to. And there's a lot others. I mean, I'm just sort of just putting a few things out there. And lastly, some additional resources might be for wherever you live. Check into your regional AAA, which is your area agency on aging, and also find out who your county organization is that deals with older adults and adults living with disability. They are really good to connect to because every county is a little different in terms of what they provide to caregivers. So getting some information about what your county provides would be helpful. There is a program called the Family Caregiver Support Program, and we get federal funds for that. And every county gets some funds to help family caregivers in each county. So finding out again what your county is doing and how they're using those funds. I did talk about the North Carolina Lifespan Respite Grant, so keep that in mind. And also, again, keep in mind some of the disease-specific organizations that might be helpful with support groups, with grants, with other services and resources and supports. All right, well, that is the conclusion of my presentation. I can tell I'm talking a lot because my voice is going a little bit, but yeah, I've worked quite some time on just compiling things. I've also got my 200-hour yoga teacher training, so that's provided a lot of insight into self-care and practices that just help to support us. But I love sharing this and talking with others about how we can really try to live the best life. The Powerful Tools for Caregivers class really focuses on thriving and not just surviving. So we do want to focus on that. It's not easy. Unfortunately, there's nothing, there's nothing like real easy. We still have to work at all of this, but there are lots of options, and figure out how you tick and what works for you. And I think you could probably create a really nice self-care routine for yourselves. Anyway, so thank you so much for your attention, and I will stop talking.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Yeah, I like how you had mentioned the importance of a routine, because I think like a lot of times with self-care, we wish it was kind of like I did this one time and for some reason I didn't feel like all that better, like my whole life wasn't fixed. And unfortunately it is one of those things where it's like you have to keep doing it and really kind of build upon that idea of self-care. Libby, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes. Iris. We're sharing the same space. So anyway, that was the problem for the echo. Iris Pounds asked a question. Any resources or helpful tips for getting a caregiver's mental health assessed? For example, are there mental health providers that are willing to come to the home when that caregiver won't go in for a visit and refuses any virtual sessions?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know that in this area, so the Triangle area, I'm trying to remember, there is an organization that will go out to the home, and Medicare also helps to reimburse them. What's it called? Silver Linings is what it's called. So that, that might be an option. I don't know of a lot of, to me, that's unique. I don't know of a lot of therapists that come out to the home, but I know they have that model. I think nowadays too, though, that with the virtual, I think a lot of people are, going in that direction of using the virtual platform. So, but yeah, I mean, if the person has to obviously be willing to be evaluated. So the best place to start is usually your primary care physician, so they can make sure that there's no, medication interactions or other physical things that are happening. They're usually really good to start with. but the caregiver is going to have to be the one that makes that decision to go and get seen. But there might be a therapist that could come out as well in some areas.
Thank you, Lisa. And I wanted to let everyone know that I did put the website powerfultoolsforcaregivers.org in the chat. I know you'll get that in a few days also, but that's where you can go to sign up for the class. And I was wondering, you talked a little bit about the virtual and in-person. Is there going to likely to be more in-persons? There are none in North Carolina right now.
Yeah, so there should be in-person ones more now, I think. And not everybody posts their local classes on the main website, unfortunately. So that, again, that might be something to check with your area agency on aging, your county agency, to see if they know of any of these powerful tools classes, because a lot of communities do have them, but they may not be known about. We're just finishing up one that we were doing in Morrisville. This week's our last class, and then we'll be doing another one probably in the Raleigh area in the spring. So, but yeah, so there should be quite a few more in-person ones now that are happening. Yeah.
You did such a great job of giving us so much information. It's hard to think of any questions. I also want everyone to know, please write your questions in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll be happy to ask Lisa if you have something that you would like answered. I have one kind of question. Is I was wondering if you think that in our country in the future, there will be more financial and medical support for caregivers to keep their loved ones at home and not institutionalized.
Yeah, that's a hard one. I mean, I would certainly hope so, but I think part of the most frustrating part of the job, I'm a social worker, is that there's not enough resources out there for what we need in healthcare. I mean, there just isn't. There's so many gaps and services for people that really need it. And, we want to come up with all these innovative solutions, but what we really need is we need more help providing home care to people and giving families that ability to have home care come in that's either reasonably priced or free. And as we know, that's very few and far between to find that. I hope so. I mean, it's hard to know. I mean, I know there's a lot of great caregiving advocate groups out there that are really advocating for that. So that would be my hope. What I also think would be helpful, as we're heading into the baby boomers becoming older adults, we have a direct care worker shortage. We already have one now, but it's really going to be a crisis, even more so in the next 10, 15 years. And what I'd love to see is having our caregivers get paid in the home more. North Carolina doesn't really offer that very much. Some states like New York State and different states will offer that, where they will pay a caregiver. But we don't really do that very much here in North Carolina. And I think that would be helpful, because at least that would give some financial assistance to the caregiver who's not able to work as much, and offset that stress a little bit. So I don't know, but, I think advocating, I mean, to make policy changes, we have to advocate for that. So we have to, one, be educated about what is going on. We have to vote so that we're voting for people that are going to support that, and being advocates and talking to our legislatures about what it is that we need, and what it's like to be a caregiver and not have the support that we need. I think that's just important. So.
Okay, yes, I agree with everything you said. And Iris, who asked the previous question, kind of followed up with wanting to know about, she just wrote in, home care is a huge expense for my family. So if anyone knows of any resources, please share. In the meantime, how can we advocate? Where do we start look outside of voting? So you had mentioned voting, maybe you have some other options for everyone to be able to advocate for the caregivers. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, no, that's great. There are, there's the North Carolina Coalition on Aging is doing a lot of work on that. There's a serious illness coalition in North Carolina that is really focused a lot on caregivers. I can definitely like compile a few more and send them to you all so that you could send them out. Yeah, I mean, the home care situation, it is difficult because usually I look at, is a person a veteran? Because if if you're a veteran, there's a possibility you might get some care. Do you have Medicaid? There might be some options through Medicaid. That's one way to advocate, is that we do need to expand Medicaid in the state. Because it will help so many more people if we can get Medicaid. We have a terrible Medicaid system here. I'm just saying, it's very poor, and that needs to change. That really does need to change. So that's a place to advocate right there. If they have Medicaid, though, there's a few other, services for that. And then, if you have a long-term care policy, which most people don't have that. But really, you might get a few, you might get a little bit of home health here, you get hospice at the, at the end of your life, but there's not much in between that you can access, which, and that's a problem. I'm trying to think of other ways to advocate. I know, like, I'm part of the National Association of Social Workers, so NASW North Carolina does advocate for lots of policies, and so there's things that you can sign up for to get emails on, just to kind of understand sort of what's going on in the legislature. But there's definitely, if you're interested and have the time, there's definitely a way I'm sure you could plug into that. So I'll think of a list and send them on so that you can get that. Because I think that's a real important piece to making any sort of substantial change in the system.
Okay, thank you so much. And you should all be reading in the chat. James and Dolan, they listed a lot of options as far as writing your state representatives on the federal level and the state level, which especially in our state of North Carolina, there are, like you mentioned, other states that are doing a lot more for their caregivers as opposed to North Carolina. So that's good. And then Janice wrote AARP and Alzheimer's Association both advocate. I'm not involved with the Alzheimer's, but I know AARP has a huge caregivers portion and really advocate a lot. You can sign up for their newsletters either by mail or email, and those are helpful. At this point, I know Lauren has some questions for you also, Lisa. So I'm going to pass it over to her to start asking you. And I just want to thank you again. I learned so much in this webinar. So thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you.
All righty, excellent. Yeah, I put in a handout on the chat that we have on our website too, on kind of like advocacy and just like the general how to contact your legislators or and what that looks like. But I look forward to that full list as well, because I think there's a lot of people that are interested in that, right? In terms of caregiving, we're looking at people that are living with mental health challenges, with substance use disorder, with intellectual developmental disabilities, with aging conditions and chronic diseases and brain injury, and so like there's a lot of people, but we're not all talking. And so I think if we all got together to kind of do that, I think we'd make a lot more of an impact. So I had a few questions just to kind of pick your brain. Are there cultural differences that you see related to caregiving and how that might impact someone's, how they give care, how they do self-care? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, yes, I don't know. I probably can't answer specifically, of course, but yes, I think there's definitely cultural differences. And I think we're trying to do a better job of understanding those a little bit better and having more cultural competency. I'm just trying to think of ways that I have seen it. Yeah, and it's I don't know that I could speak to anything real specific, but
Well, I think because there's so much,
Yeah,
right?
there's
I mean, there's so many
exactly.
little nuances.
Yeah, exactly. It's been interesting to see the classes that I've done. I had done one that was primarily an African American Black class at a church, a historically Black church, and their conditions were a lot different than some of the, like, say, more the Caucasian groups that I've done. It was more chronic illness that they might have had versus like a dementia per se, or and I just, as we're learning more about how the outcomes, how we're seeing how race has affected people's, physical and healthcare throughout the years, you can really see that. I felt like, wow, you could really see that in the situation of, like, most likely they haven't had the access, and they had just a lot of chronic conditions that maybe some other communities don't have. So that, to me, that was very enlightening. Yeah, but and I think it might be AARP that has some really good one-page handouts as well that talk about some different cultural beliefs about caregiving and like a lot of cultures have different beliefs about family in general, in terms of how tight and close that is. And so I mean, there definitely is a difference there for sure. I have them saved. If you're interested, I can send them to you as well, Lauren, if you would be interested in seeing that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting when you think about, different cultures value either, like, do you have multi-generations in a home is more common, or, those having older or having adults kind of still living at home. And it's just every situation is very, very different. And so I think that could definitely have an impact on caring for individuals.
Mhm.
I was wondering, kind of along those same lines of, is it cultural aspects, but really just different people in general. You mentioned the importance of respite. Do you find that some people are afraid that that's like kind of almost like admitting that they need help? And how do we kind of overcome that belief that getting extra assistance is like you're too weak to take this on, if you get my drift?
Right. Yeah, I think that is difficult because, and then some caregivers, feel like they're going to take care of their person the best. So they don't have the trust that somebody else is going to do it as well as they would, which is certainly understandable. Yeah, I mean, I think, we all need, I mean, I try to just sort of normalize that we all need help. Every single one of us. It doesn't just mean older people need help or people with disabilities need help. I mean, everybody needs help. And some stages of our life, we need more help than other stages. So I try to just normalize it. Like, it's and being a human, we are interconnected. We are, we depend on one another. We can't do it all by ourselves. And I think just really, like, nobody can do it all by themselves. There's nobody out there that can or is doing it all by themselves. So it's okay to be able to ask for that. And by taking care of yourself, you're taking better care of your loved one, because your care is going to be that much better for them. So we really try to focus on, that this ultimately is really going to help their family, their loved one that they're caring for. But yeah, I know it is hard, and we have, in this country, we have a very, stoic independence here that we need to, maybe open up a little bit from that. Yeah. So as
Yeah.
much as possible, just normalizing it and just making people understand that they're not expected to do it all. I mean, yeah, I try to be as gentle as I can with people, and so.
Right. Yeah. I think that's the key, is just normalizing it. We all need help, whether or not, no matter what, it's just we can't do everything. Um, One question that I had, we're looking a little bit more about, relationships, and obviously having that kind of caregiving relationship might be different than what you might have had for, your partner, spouse, romantic partner, anything. Is there anything that people can do to kind of maintain the, and this might be out of your scope, but like the intimacy and romantic aspects of a relationship that might be either hindered or changed when someone needs a little bit more assistance with personal care needs, such as bladder, bowel, etc.?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I know that that's, especially when I worked with ALS, that was often something that was really difficult because, and, as we know, the roles change in lots of different ways. And that's certainly, if your partner is the one that you're caring for, a significant way. And I think, if you can get people to help you with that so that you're not the number one primary person all the time, which of course, may not be the case. But we also need to talk more about intimacy and sexual relationships in these situations. We tend to not really talk about that and address that, which that is, of course, a very important part of being a human and being an adult and being in a relationship. And so having more open discussions about that and people that can talk to us about tips or, ways to sort of modify or whatever it might be, I think is important so that people know that it's okay to talk about it. I think I'm trying to think if Duke Dementia Family Support Program does a lot of webinars. They do like one a month, and I'm thinking they did one on intimacy that could be certainly general. But yeah, I just think us having more of an open discussion about that with our physicians, and whoever else it might be.
Absolutely, totally agree in terms of, making it part of the conversation, especially since, it's such a big part of building relationships. And, I find that someone's identity as a human can sometimes change as a caregiver, like their person becomes kind of attached to the other person. Is it something that you find that it's really important for people to maintain that identity, or do we kind of do you find people find a sense of comfort in kind of having that purpose of being someone's carer? Like, maybe both are okay. What do you think?
Yeah, I think both. I do, because I met with a caregiver recently whose loved one had passed away, and I think she was definitely in that. And while she did, she did things for herself, and she was pretty good about, getting resources and self-care, but she was really struggling to understand what her purpose in life was now that because so much of her time was devoted to him, and just kind of figuring that out. So I think it's good to have that as part of your identity. I think there should be more to your identity than hopefully just that, so that you do have a little something that's just yours. But I think people they're proud of being a caregiver. That certainly is meaningful. And like the statistics said, even with all the stress of caregiving, like 9 out of 10 said it was worthwhile, and they enjoyed doing it. So, but I think, to try to not just be, one thing. It's like, it's nice to sort of have some other outlets as well, if you can. But
Yeah, maybe that's what part of the harmony that you were talking about, kind of harmonizing balance between those as well. I could see that. Another question I had related to sometimes caregiving individuals with disabilities, it's not always, rosy. There might be some additional challenges, particularly, behaviors or, things like that. Does the class, or do you have any sort of strategies for developing certain boundaries so that individual caregivers don't feel like they have to take on some of, maybe the name calling, or, when things kind of get dark, and separate kind of the brain injury from those kind of dark moments? Are there strategies that you have for individuals that may be struggling with that?
yeah, and I think we do focus on the communication piece. And I think we talk about assertive communication. So it's not being passive, right? And it's not being aggressive, but it's trying to be clear about what it is that you're feeling and what you need, and being able to try to express that as directly as you can. I think it's difficult, of course, when we have any sort of, cognitive impairment, or, somebody that's just very difficult. And so, I don't know if like specifically learning techniques for a specific condition might be helpful, but it does talk about how you can express yourself and kind of communicate that And at least you know that you've communicated it. I mean, and again, we kind of emphasize in the class, like, we're giving you these communication tools. It's not going to solve the problem. It's not going to make, it's not necessarily even going to work, you know, but you can only control yourself. You can only control what you say and what you do. And if you know, okay, I've done what I can do, you know, and that's the best we can do sometimes in a situation. But I know for dementias especially, there's just a lot of really good information about how to communicate to someone with dementia. There's just more and more out there. And I think that is super helpful, to be able to talk about, like they talk about anchoring with somebody, where you really hold their hand, like you hold it like this, like it's more of a, and you make the eye contact and you have clear communication and you use a very neutral tone. So the tone is a big deal. So really being aware of like how you're saying things and what your tone sounds like, I know is important. And just trying to keep somewhat of a, peaceful environment as much as you can. But yeah, I know it's, it doesn't always work in every situation. So.
Yeah, but I think that, like you said, with the communication is such an important skill that I don't think that we necessarily are taught, or really kind of like, like those nuances of really having like a neutral conversation versus like having it escalate. And I know that a lot of people with brain injury, their carers they'll go through these really like negative experiences, but then the next day the individual doesn't remember it. So it's like really hard to even like debrief and be like, hey, like this made me feel like really bad. Like this really hurt my feelings. And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I don't even remember what happened. And I know that can be really tough as a carer, to keep going, as, for them, it never happened, but for you, it hit, so I think it's tough to kind of keep going with someone. I know that like keeping those boundaries and make sure that you don't have to keep on kind of taking it, and that your thoughts and your feelings don't matter still.
Right. Well, and I think, caregivers the one that is sick tends to get all the attention. And so it's important. They shouldn't be calling all the shots, the person that's sick. The caregiver needs to be a part of that too. Sometimes we allow the person that's sick to make all the decisions about certain things, but it's like, it should also incorporate the caregiver, because that's, you're just as important as that care receiver. Whether you're sick or not sick, you are just as important as them. And so your needs should not be completely trampled because you're catering to a person that's sick. So as much as you can, try to maintain that and try to understand and know. I mean, and part of it is like giving yourself that message of like, I am just as important. I know, I don't have a brain injury, and I'm so, I'm sorry that this person is going through this, and I hate this for them, but that still doesn't mean that that I'm not important too, and I shouldn't take care of myself. So I do see that a lot with caregivers. And I think it's just giving them the permission that it's okay to take. I think that a lot of times for professionals, like giving them the permission, like, you are important. You deserve to take care of yourself too. You are just as important as this other person over here. And just getting permission and hearing that, repeatedly, it's never a bad thing. So.
Yeah, I agree. It's almost like finding that common ground, and that, I'm sure that partnership in terms of taking on care would help a lot with, building the foundation for the long-term care, because as you mentioned, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So, starting off with that really strong foundation can be really helpful as a team, rather than, any sort of differing power hierarchy that could be troubling. One question I was thinking about when you had mentioned self-care, I know a lot of people feel like self-care can feel selfish, right? And so self-care, it's like, I don't know, or maybe they don't get like, they don't really feel anything out of like a bubble bath or something like that. Are there types of self-care that are kind of like hidden in acts of service? Like sometimes it's like, if someone's like, oh, well, I prefer to do something, or, whatever, like, can washing the dishes or doing laundry or, planning something, is that self-care too? What does self-care look like for different people?
Yeah. Well, I think it's definitely, obviously it's definitely different for each person. So you have to choose what's helpful for you. But I think, I mean, it's possible to have like mindfulness while you're doing the dishes. So if you're just like, I'm going to completely focus on, I'm going to get the dishes done, but I'm also going to, just listen to music or just focus on this activity. And it was interesting because I saw, I was listening to something that the Dalai Lama was talking about this morning, and he differentiated selfish. He said there is, oh gosh, what was the first way? There's kind of the selfish that I can't remember what he called it now, but the selfish that we think of as selfish, like that's worldly, that's just wanting more. And then he said, but there's a wise selfish. There's a wise part where that's important for us to maintain that, that feeling of self-care. And so I really do also try to reframe the idea of selfishness. Where is that coming from? Why do we feel that way? Is it, we've gotten these messages our whole life that, we can't be selfish, but, it's okay. I mean, it is okay to take care of yourself. I mean, that's a good thing. You're just going to be a much more better functioning, well-rounded, person that's going to be happier in the world. So it's going to help everybody. I mean, like the first step is like focusing on ourselves and making ourselves be as peaceful and happy as we can be. And then all that does is just, it puts it out on everybody else. It gives love and goodwill to everybody else. So with this world that we're living in right now, that's so, there's so much going on. I just am like, the more love and peace we can put out from ourselves, but we have to feel it to some degree, right? The better the world is. So I think you have to kind of, do the things that feel good to us to do, and give, know that it's okay, and that really try to question those ideas of selfishness that we have in our heads.
I love that. I think that's a perfect way to end our presentation here. And I just so appreciate your time, your energy, your thoughts. I hope that everybody can check out this wonderful resource in terms of powerful tools for caregivers, as well as the any other resources that are out there mentioned in this presentation. Like I mentioned, I'll put the presentation on the website, and you'll be able to view this recording as well. So feel free to share it. I'm going to put a link in the chat to some of our virtual activity classes, which could be another form of kind of respite. If your loved one or someone you're interacting with, they can spend an hour with these classes. We've got music therapy, we've got exercise, and we've got mindfulness right now. And so that could be an opportunity for caregivers to rest and or do something that they want to do. And then I'm also going to put in the certificate, which you'll also get on the with the survey when you fill that out. So thank you again. Lisa, do you have any final words or anything to leave us with?
No, but when I send the presentation, my contact information is on there. So if you want to talk about anything further, I'd love to talk to you about it. But yeah, just know that you are important, and you are enough, and just take care of yourselves, and know that's a really good thing for the whole world if you do. So.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lisa. I look forward to partnering with you sometime in the future, and we'll talk about maybe some advocacy projects we can get on board with and change the world. No big deal. Casual day.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I hope everybody has a wonderful day. We'll see you next year for our webinar series. Bye, y'all.